I saw the trailer for Rebel Moon a few weeks back and figured, why not put my spin on it? So I picked some shots from the trailer and quickly came up with a tiny story. And I did some storyboard to remind myself that I can't draw. Anyway, the next step was to find all the assets I needed for the project. Characters, locations, weapons, the list kept getting bigger. My main location was inside of a barn. I found a few models of a barn and I mixed and matched them inside Blender to get something I wanted for the project. To create a similar character to this one in the movie, again I kit bashed some assets and changed their materials. Then created two 𝒐𝒔 soldiers and this female character in a similar way. Same process, went for their weapons as well. Then I needed a method to animate all these characters, and my source of animations comes from 𝒚𝒐𝒎𝒆, a free animation library. But in order to use them, first I need to rig these characters. 𝒚𝒐𝒎𝒆 has its own auto rigging option, but for this project I opted to use 𝒎𝒄, a free character rigging application that doesn't necessarily need your character to be in a standard pose to rig them. I was able to take this soldier in a random pose and rig it quickly using 𝒎𝒄, and it did a decent job. But since they rigged using 𝒎𝒄, I needed an extra step to make them compatible with 𝒚𝒐𝒎𝒆 animations. But that wasn't difficult either, thanks to the Rococo Studio add-on for Blender, a free add-on that contains a retargeting option which I use to assign 𝒚𝒐𝒎𝒆 animation to 𝒎𝒄 characters. I select both source and target armatures and hit Build Bone List. Rococo will find matching bones in both armatures, and with a click of a button, I can retarget the 𝒚𝒐𝒎𝒆 animation to this character. This way I was able to rig my other characters as well. It wasn't necessarily faster than the 𝒚𝒐𝒎𝒆 process for standard pose characters, but it usually did a better job in terms of weight painting. Having a control rig is much better for the characters that needed to hand animate. Thanks to iClone Character Creator Pipeline add-on for Blender, which is also free, I was able to create a control rig easily. 𝒚𝒐𝒎𝒆 has its own add-on that generates control rigs, but I wasn't able to make it work inside the latest Blender 4.0. To create the animations, I combined a few 𝒚𝒐𝒎𝒆 actions together. An easiest way to do that inside Blender is by using the nonlinear editor. Nonlinear editor allows me to use each action as a strip in a layer-based workflow. I can loop the action, blend the action, and also change its influence on others by just tweaking sliders. This way, I can blend from a rifle animation to a kicking animation and then to a walking animation, and it ends with a rifle aiming animation again. I can select the walking strip and change its repeat value to loop the walk cycle. To move the character from A to B, I created another strip here and animated the armature location. If I want to adjust a certain pose of the character, like adjusting his hand while holding the gun, I can create a new action layer and set it to combine. Then I can make those adjustments without breaking other animations. When talking about holding a weapon, almost every character in the animation holds a weapon. In cases like a single staff, I could attach the staff to the character's left hand bone by using a child of constraint. But with a two-handed objects like a sword or a rifle, it's a bit complicated. First, you have to attach the weapon to one hand and then add an empty object to the other hand location. Attach this empty to the other hand bone by using IK bone constraint and make sure it influences the whole arm by changing its chain value. Parent the empty, the sword, using a child of constraint. Now the empty will take care of the second hand position and rotation, and since it's parented to the weapon, it syncs with the weapon movement as well. If you follow my channel for a while, then you might have heard that I love geometry nodes. Geometry nodes allows me to create non-destructive procedural geometry effects. In this animation, I used trail effects pack I released a few weeks ago to create sword trails for our dual sword wielding character. Using trail effects, I was quickly able to get a trail path to the sword movement, and I used the provided materials to create the trail look. I add a particle trail as well. If you like to take a look at trail effects, check the link in the description. And that wasn't all for geometry nodes. Using geometry nodes, I created small muzzle flash effects. One shoots at a given frame and the other shoots at a constant rate, which was quite helpful in a big battle sequence. In the same way, I created a simple bullet firing system. And also I created a simple explosion effect as well. Comment down below if you want to see tutorials on these effects. I also created a dust effect to give the idea that a ship just landed, but it is barely visible in the final render. And if you thought that was it, no, I used disintegration effects as well, another procedural product to create disintegration effects quickly. And I used geometry nodes to scatter some grass and also to optimize cloth simulation. Using these techniques, I was able to put together a few scenes. And when it comes to lighting, for a lot of scenes, I had one strong directional light. Then added some secondary lights here and there to either light any dark areas or to reveal more of the shade. Although I used HDRIs for some scenes, I kept its strength low and used some images I grabbed online to act as my sky for the camera. They had more interesting cloud patterns. You can import them to Blender using images as planes option. This way I put some mountains as well. Make sure to disable shadows for the sky plane and directly plug its sky image texture into the material output. Also, I love volumetrics. I rarely make a scene without volumetrics. So, I added a cube, covered the whole area with it, and then added a principal volume shader. Lowered the density. If it illuminated a certain secondary lights that I didn't want to see in the volume, I could disable the volume scattering of those lights. And once I got everything done, it was time to render, which could have been the most tedious part of the process, but thanks to our sponsor Fox Render Farm, it was pretty much easy. All I had to do was pack the blend file and upload it to Fox Render Farm server. Once uploaded, it puts files in similar directory to your PC, which is helpful to keep the paths of the assets correctly. Then I submitted the project for render, and Fox Render Farm analyzed the file for any possible errors and mistakes. And that's not it. Once the analysis is done, then you can do a test render for a few frames before submitting every frame to render. And guess what? That is my favorite feature, because there are times you simply forget to check your visibility settings. And of course this auto smooth thing. Trust me, this thing has ruined so many of my renders. So I fixed all those mistakes and resubmitted the project for a full render. And that's not it. With its lightning fast and secure rendering, Fox Render Farm supports a wide range of 3D software, renderers and plugins. Plus, its flexible pricing options make it an excellent choice for both small and large-scale projects. Not to mention, Fox Render Farm has even been trusted to render some of the biggest titles in the industry, including Love, Death and Robots. Use the link in the description to get a $50 render coupon to render your next big animation with Fox Render Farm. Once the render is done, I did some finishing touches in After Effects. Although I rendered a separate volumetric pass in Eevee thinking it would make the render better. It just made things difficult. There was no motion blur, depth of field, and worse, what are these glitches? Anyway, thanks to some lens blur, pixel motion blur, and clone stamp tool in After Effects, I was able to make those renders somewhat usable, but I don't recommend that step for anyone. So I added some glow, lens flare, and some color corrections along with some lens dirt effects, and here is the final animation. Until next time.